The signal came in on a Tuesday. I remember that because I had just finished my third cup of cooling station coffee and was thinking, perhaps the 10,000th time in my career, that the Meridian Deep Ear was the loneliest posting in Earth's entire defense architecture. 47 crew, one listening platform at the upper edge of low orbit, and an ocean of silence that had been unbroken for as long as any record we kept could measure. Then the silence broke. I was Scene Signals Officer on the Meridian Deep Ear, which is a title that sounds grander than the work. Mostly it was patience, sit in the chair, watch the bands, log the nothing. My predecessor in the post had held it for 31 years and retired without ever hearing anything more significant than electromagnetic scatter off the Martian relay network. I had held it for 19. We were the people humanity assigned to wait, and we were chosen for exactly that, our capacity to wait without going quietly hollow inside. The signal came in at 317 station time. Carrier wave first, structured, repeating, not natural. Then the encoding layer, which our translation protocols cracked inside 6 seconds. Then the content, which I read once, sat down on the console and read again before I trusted my own eyes. It was a fleet announcement, 90,000 years old. That was what the DK signature on the transmission told us. 90,000 years of drift and attenuation between the point of origin and my console, traveling at the speed of light, arriving at the address it had been sent to. The address was Earth. The sender was a species that had called themselves the Vethara conclave, old colonial overseers who had, according to the deepest strata of our pre-recovery historical archive, administered human populations across this world for several thousand years, before departing and considering the matter of Earth closed. That was a long time ago. The transmission told me that a Vethara return fleet had been dispatched, carrying administrative and enforcement personnel, intending to reassert what the message called residual domain authority. They expected to find at most scattered survivors. They expected compliance. They expected, above everything else, that 90,000 years of absence had left humanity too depleted, too fragmented, too broken to offer anything except quiet submission. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened the priority channel to command and read the transmission to them, word by word. The response from Fleet Command took 11 seconds. 11 seconds to receive, read, and answer. Not because it was surprising. The Vethara conclave was in our archive. We had known they left. We had known, from the physics of their departure trajectory and the range of their home system, any return fleet would have to cross a minimum of 40,000 light years to reach us, which placed a lower bound on their travel time. 90,000 years. Earth had held the Vethara file open. The expected return window had been flagged in standing defense orders since the third rebuilding period, roughly 60,000 years ago. The return had been anticipated, planned for, and rebriefed to every generation of defense planners, and filed under the heading, when, not if. Fleet Command's 11-second response was simply, acknowledged, execute Standing Order Kethavar. Good work, Officer Soran. I was Officer Soran. The standing order bore the name Kethavar, which was the Vethari word for overseer, covered from the archive, and chosen by the defense historians who drafted the order because they believed in naming things honestly. Standing Order Kethavar was not a scramble. It was not an emergency. It was the quiet, deliberate activation of infrastructure that had been built, maintained, and upgraded across 60,000 years of patient preparation. Within the hour, the Meridian Veil, 1,200 orbital defense platforms arranged in a layered intercept shell, came to full readiness status. The Kethavar deep-range sensor net, which had been running in passive mode since I was a child, shifted to active and began tracking the inbound fleet's position. The first long-range projection placed them 12 days out, traveling at fractional light velocity on their final approach deceleration. They were big ships by Vethari standards, old design. We had better in dry dock from 400 years ago. The 12 days were quiet. I spent them at my station, listening, logging, watching the fleet close. The crew of the Meridian Deep Ear didn't talk much during that period. Not out of fear, out of the specific gravity that settles over people who understand what they are witnessing. History does not often announce itself with this kind of clarity. We knew what was coming. We knew what it would find. We sat with that knowledge, the way you sit with anything immense and irreversible, carefully, and without looking away. On day 9, the Vethara fleet attempted a communication on the old colonial frequency bands. The same bands the transmission had used, the same encoding layer. They were announcing themselves. Establishing administrative contact. The message was formal and assumed command authority. This system was being reclaimed under Vethari Domain Charter. All resident populations were to cease independent governance and await designation. All defensive installations were to stand down and register for inspection. I logged it. I did not respond. Those were the standing orders. On day 11, they entered inner system space, and their lead ship ran a sensor sweep of Earth. I was watching the feed from the deep-range net when their sweep returned, and they began, presumably, to understand what they were seeing. Sweep would have shown them the orbital platforms, the defense ring, the Kethavar net's active emitters. It would have shown them the city light patterns across the continents. Not scattered settlement, but continental-scale urban infrastructure. Dark adapted and precisely organized, the light geometry of a civilization that had spent 90,000 years building without pause. It would have shown them the fleet anchorage at the L2 station. 300 warships, each larger than anything the Vethari had ever put in space. It would have shown them all of it at once. The full accumulated answer to their absence. Shh. And I imagine the silence that fell on their command deck was a very specific kind of system. The silence of a calculation run wrong. They attempted contact again. This time on a broader spectrum, including frequencies they had not used before, perhaps hoping to find a surviving remnant of the old colonial administrative bands, something isolated and compliant. They found instead the Meridian Deep Ear, which answered them on every frequency simultaneously with a recorded transmission. That command had prepared 90 years ago and updated 17 times since I had the honor of transmitting it. The message was not long. It acknowledged receipt of their original 90,000-year-old announcement. It informed them that Earth had received that announcement, understood its intent, and had spent the intervening millennia preparing a reply. It noted that the current human population stood at approximately 40 billion, distributed across this system, and 11 others within 40 light years. It noted that human defensive infrastructure now encompassed 712 orbital platforms, a standing fleet of over 1,000 capital ships, and fixed installation armaments capable of engaging targets at 2 light minutes. It informed the Vethari fleet that it was currently within the engagement envelope of 460 of those platforms, and had been since day 9 of its approach. It told them that their domain charter was not recognized, and had not been recognized since the second building period. And it invited them, in language that was formal and without anger, to part this system on a heading away from Earth, and not to return. There was a long pause. Then the lead Vethari ship acknowledged the transmission. Then the fleet turned. I watched them go on the deep-range display, 12 ships, decelerating, and then accelerating outbound, their signatures shrinking across the hours until they were points, and then nothing. No shots fired. No final message. No protest. Just the slow, quiet withdrawal of something that had come a very long way expecting one world and found another so thoroughly that argument was not possible. I sat at my station for a while after they cleared the sensor net's range. The crew were beginning to talk again in low voices. The way people talk after a held breath is finally let out. Someone brought me a cup of coffee, which was better than the last one. Through the port above my console, the limb of Earth caught the sun. Blue and white and deeply familiar. The way a thing is familiar when you have spent 19 years watching over it from 40 kilometers up. We had not always been this. I knew that from the archive, from the old records of thin years and desperate centuries, from the accounts of people who had wondered whether Earth would survive long enough to become what it became. They had wondered, and they had worked anyway. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the platforms, not the fleet, not the 12 ships retreating into the dark. The part that stayed was the generations who never knew whether any of it would matter, built and planned and recorded and passed the work down anyway, because they understood that a people who remember are a people who cannot be permanently broken. The Vethari had expected to find what they had left. They had not counted on memory. They had not counted on the particular stubbornness of a species that writes things down. I logged the contact in the standing order record, updated the Vethari file to read closed, encountered, and went back to listening. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It had weight to it, and depth, and something that felt, if you sat with it long enough, almost like peace.